Namaste, this is Ananta Ripa Ajmera, and welcome back to the True to Yourself podcast, a place where we explore the power of authentic living. Today, I am going to talk to you about a really important topic, and that is of forgiveness. We often hear this expression, oh, just forgive and forget. What often happens, however, when we simply forget about past violations is that we tend to unconsciously recreate the same situations in new contexts with a new cast of characters, playing out the same old roles as before. The only way we can really truly forgive without continuing to recreate the situations that allow people to harm us is by developing our subtle intellect, a faculty of the higher mind in the Vedic spiritual tradition, which is also known as buddhi. We're going to talk in this episode about the difference between intelligence and intellect and how you can begin to develop your intellect so that you can forgive by never forgetting the spiritual power that you are at your core. You will also learn in this episode what it means to serve the highest truth and the greatest good of all, even in very strong ways, when you have forgiveness first and foremost planted in your heart. Wow, what a loaded topic, huh? This topic of forgiveness is such an important issue that we really need to understand as journeyers on a spiritual path. Forgiveness is a kind of sacred spiritual medicine that unlocks the gateway to our own freedom. We don't forgive for someone else's sake. We forgive for our own sake. We forgive to free ourselves from the bondage of our own self-created hatred and anger and feelings of victimhood. In the Vedic spiritual tradition, we actually have no concept of being a victim, and therefore we do not complain about our circumstances. We simply understand everything in our lives as the playing out of the law of karma. It is all due to cause and effect. Anything that we experience, we have somewhere, somehow manifested. What has passed, we can never change. So I appreciate this sentiment, forgive and forget, because on the one hand, it is saying, don't be stuck in the past. There is no need to continuously replay the old memories and the old scripts and the old situations that have already gone by. This kind of circuitous replaying of the old memories and the old experiences and the old stories will actually make us really old really fast. It will literally age us. It will wear us down. It will start to show in our face. We will start to feel a kind of darkness within us that no amount of talk therapy or rehashing the situation can honestly reverse or change. What we have to do is to not live in the past, but we cannot simply forget the past at the same time. We have to start to get informed by the past to be able to, in the present moment, create the kind of future we would like to experience. And the only way that we are going to create a future full of peace and tranquility and a sense of independent, sovereign joy is by letting go of any past resentments we may be holding on to towards other people and towards our own self for getting ourselves into these situations unknowingly in the first place. We so often, without doing this kind of understanding of the past, without simply replaying the past, are setting ourselves up to recreate that past again. And that's why it's really, really important to understand what has happened in the past and to then, in that understanding, take responsibility for what role you played in allowing that situation to manifest. I have done this many, many times with many people in my own life. I feel that relationships of all kinds have been my own personal greatest classroom for true spiritual progress and self-mastery. I have had so many situations happen in my life where people have harmed me, and I, in the past, had not really processed or understood the law of karma, and therefore I found that I kept creating new situations for worse and worse experiences of betrayal and all that kind of crazy ego drama that we do when we are unaware of who we are as a spiritual being. The way I got myself out of this pattern was by, first of all, learning who am I as a spiritual being. And once I learned that I am, as it is said in the Vedic spiritual tradition, Sat, truth, Chit, consciousness, and Ananda, uninterrupted bliss that has no opposite, then my project was to never forget this. And for me, it was to always also remember that the law of karma is the greatest law that governs our entire universe. Therefore, I may not have created my past. I may not have manifested the kind of characters I've had to deal with in my life, but somewhere, even though I had situations that were really difficult in childhood and I hadn't done anything to deserve them in that period of my life, I radically accept as a spiritual being the law of reincarnation, which is actually the law of karma. The law of reincarnation states that we have had many prior births and we have committed all kinds of blunders as well as good deeds in those prior births. What we are experiencing right now in the present moment is a certain percentage of our accumulated past life karma. In this life, therefore, our mission is to wake up to the truth of who we really are as spiritual beings. And in doing so, we have the opportunity to create positive karma if there are some positive desires prompting our actions, or if you're like me and you're really tired of this whole ego-based drama of birth and rebirth and birth and rebirth and playing out all the scripts with all the characters over and over again in new and new lifetimes, then you can also perform actions based in knowledge of who you are that free you from karma. These are actions that you do simply because you ought to do them. They are not for personal benefit, for personal name and fame, for a personal sense of comfort, for personal stability, for personal ease, for personal enjoyment or pleasure, or really personal anything. They are simply actions that are done in service of what we call dharma. These are actions that are done in service of truth with a capital T. They are actions that are done in service of the greatest good of all. When we act in that way, we free ourselves from the whole script of karma. I have really benefited from applying this lens of karma to forgiving perpetrators for past violations. It has been truly empowering to be able to say, okay, well, I didn't do this. This happened to me. But when I take responsibility for the fact that I got manipulated, that I got betrayed, that I got attacked, then I give myself, or rather I remember myself as the source of power to now decide in the present moment, what kind of script am I writing forward? If I don't take that pause, then what happens is that I either perpetrate that same abuse once I get into a position of power, or I internalize the abuse and I harm myself through not eating, which is something I used to do when I was much younger, or over-exercising, or there's so many different ways that we harm ourselves through drugs, through alcohol, through promiscuity. The list can really go on and on. Gambling, stealing. There's so many things that we do. For me, it was always restricting eating. And I used to occasionally over-exercise as well to try to punish myself. And I realized, oh, hey, I'm punishing myself, but why am I doing this? I'm doing it because I have not examined the fact that I had been punished many times by other external authority figures, and I internalized that. The moment I woke up to the fact that, hey, I did this to myself, as much as it happened early on in childhood from external sources, I also carried this pattern forward. And therefore, if I want to come out of this pattern, it is my responsibility right now, right here, in this present moment, to say, I put a stop to this pattern and I will create a new way of being in my body and a new way of truly honoring my own body as the temple for my indwelling spirit. When I truly started to honor my own body as a sacred temple, then I automatically became more and more immune to outer attempts at violation of my physical, emotional, and psychological being. This did not mean that due to karma, people didn't try to still violate me. It still happened. But this time, instead of internalizing the whole script by harming myself, I had, through years and years of spiritual learning and really intense practice of spiritual teachings, been able to develop my intellect. The intellect is that faculty within us of the higher mind that empowers us to question everything. We cannot, on the spiritual journey, take anything for granted. The science of Vedanta itself teaches us and really puts a lot of emphasis on us questioning everything about the setup. Incidentally, I will say that the science of Vedanta also leaves me without any more remaining questions. By questioning everything, by questioning every situation, by not taking anything at face value or simply accepting something because some authority figure has said it, I exercised and continue to exercise the power of my own higher discernment. This discernment faculty within me, the intellect within me, is what allows me to look at a statement from someone else who I may incidentally greatly respect and admire, and ask myself, is this true or not? Is there anything in this that is relevant to me that I can actually learn from and benefit from hearing or receiving, even if it's presented quite harshly? If the answer is yes, then I take that and I use that information to better myself. A point came on my spiritual journey when the admonishments, and they were really, really bad admonishments and shaming that came from authority figures, was completely, factually, totally untrue. And at that time, to believe that I need to internalize the shame that some outer authority figure is trying to poison me with was actually my choice that I decided to say no to this time. I say no, and I free myself from the influence of this authority from here forward, because I have seen through the wisdom what is true and what is not true. I have been able to, through my own questioning process, a deep, deep introspective questioning process, been able to see the reality for what it is, not for what I would want it to be. And so even when I was greatly devastated and disappointed by the admonishments and behaviors and other things of some people I truly respected on my journey, I was able to, with the power of the intellect, simply accept it as part of our human journey. As travelers on the human journey, especially when we're not awake to the truth of who we really are as spiritual beings, we all make lots of mistakes. Can we then look at these situations, first of all, objectively? That is what the intellect and the process of continually questioning and placing the situations in the light of spirituality helps us to do. When we have discerned what is true, what is not true, for example, what was not true in that situation helped me to see a lot of other things that were not true. And it helped me because I was able to see things for what they are and not get caught up in them. I could go through intense heartbreak and betrayal and so much darkness that was coming at me from outside sources by staying really centered in the power of my own ability to accept the light as well as the darkness in my life. We are, while we are in this human life, in this physical world, going to be confronted continuously with pairs of opposites. Where we have light, we also have darkness. When we have profit, we will also experience loss. When we have gains, we will have losses. When we have honor, we will also have folks who will try to dishonor us. When we have fame, there may be disfame. The whole point of the spiritual journey is that we can reach that point where we can be truly equanimous in the face of shame, honor, and dishonor, in the face of gain and loss, in the face of loyalty and betrayal, in the face of darkness and light. Because the world, by the very definition of it in Vedanta, is dvandvas. It's pairs of opposites. The world is full of opposites, and our job as spiritual people trying to awaken to the truth and to the light of the soul within is to become neutral and objective. We want to be able to see reality for what it is. We want to be able to see the good. We want to be able to see the bad. And we want to constantly be evolving our own selves so that we can manifest more and more good and or less and less karma in the first place to even have to go through. Because if in this lifetime we stop creating karma and we actually burn through whatever karma we have experienced through that light of knowledge and through the practice of real forgiveness, then we can actually come closer and closer to the point of liberation, or jivan mukti, when it is a liberation that happens while still in the body. And then eventually, when we have reached Jivan Mukti, when our body drops, we will not have to come back again and be born again. And we experience a complete liberation from the whole cycle of birth and death. And that is known as nirvana in the Buddhist tradition, or moksha in the Vedic spiritual tradition, salvation in Christianity. It is the one and only purpose for which we take this human birth. Forgiveness is a huge, huge, huge practice to empower us to be able to burn through that karma. When we take responsibility that, yes, somehow I have created this situation where I have unconsciously played a part in the cycle of violence, then it is my opportunity to create a new cycle. It is my opportunity to stop the cycle by simply awakening to it and recognizing that in every moment I myself am responsible for the karma that comes to me through my every thought, through my every word, and through my every action. When I realized this and I continuously applied this, I was able to free myself from the need for some higher authorities to validate me, to be able to tell me that I am worthy. Because instead of believing the shame that was coming towards me, I awoke to the power within me that can question what is true and what is untrue. If I had not been awake to that, then even though I was being fed lies, I would have just internalized that and I would have sunk in my spirit. When we do not allow our spirit to be annihilated, that is progress. That is power. That is what will also put a stop to these cycles. When we hold on to anger, when we do not forgive ourselves for whatever role we may have played in the situation and or the other person or persons, then we stay stuck in that cycle and we keep on perpetuating it. Therefore, instead of running away from it, instead of denying it, instead of pretending that it never happened or that we're just okay, we have to say, no, it is not okay, and I will not forget. I will remember the situation always, because that situation was my teacher. And that situation was my reminder from a higher power to never forget, especially who I am as a soul. It is in these dark moments, it is in these challenging situations of life that we actually have an opportunity for our own awakening. And as we progress through life, our intellect and our ability to remain objective and to practice equanimity in the midst of challenges and enjoyable experiences is what will ultimately mold our character and shape our destiny on our spiritual path. I really love how Swami Parthasarthi, an incredible Vedanta guru, has written in his wonderful book, The Fall of the Human Intellect, that as you are able to withstand greater and greater losses, it proves that your intellect has developed strength and objectivity. Imagine the worst tragedy does not make the slightest difference in you. You remain unperturbed, calm, and composed. And you go about normally pursuing your actions and obligations in the world. You can achieve that state only when your intellect soars high and maintains perfect objectivity in life. You then command enduring peace and happiness. This situation that I shared about of someone who I greatly respected shaming me and violating me in all kinds of ways that I won't even go into actually was an incredible perfect experience that showed me the power of my own intellect, because I was able to go through it in a much more calm and composed way than I had gone through other similar but less intense, actually, situations of the same kind previously in my life. I recognized that by being unconscious, by being in denial of the difficulties I went through in my childhood, I recreated them for myself in a new classroom, so that with the knowledge, then I could actually remain calm and composed in the face of them. It was an incredible experience. I will never, ever forget it, though I have completely forgiven the person and all the people involved in this very, very dramatic and crazy, I must say, situation of life. Because I don't, now I don't see it as crazy. I just see it as, oh, this is life. This is what it means to have a human birth. And this is why, actually, it is so worthwhile to aim for liberation. Because as long as we're in this body, as long as we're in this world, we will have to go through duality. Even if we have the most incredible love of all different kinds from all different relationships flowing to us, we will one day lose these relationships to death, to dis-ease, to some other situation. Swami Ramatirtha once said that whatever you are attached to, you will lose. It will go away. And therefore, our lesson is to really learn how to let go. We need to let go of everything on the spiritual journey that we are not. This doesn't mean literally letting go, although sometimes it can mean that. This means first and foremost letting go of the power of any situation, of any violation to affect your equanimity, your mental balance, and your peace of mind. This is such a powerful and important lesson that cannot be underemphasized on the spiritual journey. I am reading a really beautiful book right now called Hollywood to the Himalayas, A Journey of Healing and Transformation by Sadhviji Bhagavati Saraswati. She is a really wonderful spiritual leader who had gone to India at a very young age, and after being in the pursuit of a PhD in psychology, she decided to go to India and to become fully immersed into a spiritual journey with her guru, Pujya Swamiji, who had changed her life and her whole path going forward. It's such a powerful book about how she had grappled with very real painful issues with eating disorders and trauma and unresolved issues from her childhood with her father, and how going to India, it really helped her to heal from this. And the greatest healing came from forgiveness. She writes about it in this beautiful chapter, The Greatness of Forgiving, which I want to read you a little bit from. She talks about how her father, who had abandoned her in childhood after a lot of abuse, had started writing letters to her. And she says, "The sweetness of his letters unraveled me. Who is this man? I had such a complete picture of him as a terrifying, haunting monster. Now, more than 2 decades after violating the very body he'd given me, after attempting to rub out, to smear away, to extinguish the very life he'd created, after turning the tools of his profession, of medicine, of psychiatry, into tools of torment, now he wanted to be friends. There would be, it was clear, no discussion of anything that had happened in the last nearly 30 years, not the abuse, not the abandonment, nor any ramifications of it. Now we would just chat lightly about academic curricula in India compared to America, about whether sewing or embroidery was more of a useful skill for women in the Himalayas. My head spun. I looked deeply into each mirror I passed. Who am I? What really happened? Is this the man of my nightmares? Are these letters from the monster? Could a man capable of what he'd done just turn around and become normal? Had he ever been anything other than normal? Had I made it all up? Were my memories figments of my imagination? Projections of my doctors and psychologists? The foundation on which I understood my life was coming apart. She further writes about how she asks her guru, Swamiji, did this even happen or did I make it up? And she talks about how he just was silent, but he kept on smiling, and she had to really beg him, and he kept moving around, kind of trying to avoid talking to her and doing what he needed to do. And so she kept on asking, and finally he says, "You have forgiven him. That is your greatness." And she still wanted to know, but did it actually happen? Are my memories correct? And he just repeated, "You have forgiven him. That is your greatness." Then after the 4th or 5th time, she asked the same question, but did it really happen? In an increasingly obsessed frenzy, she writes how Swamiji turned around in a moment of great compassion, mixed, I am sure, with great exasperation, met my eyes, and through my eyes bore into the deepest corners of my being. Matter-of-factly, he said, "To forgive something that did not happen is not so great." She further writes, "So that was it. The full lesson in 2 short sentences. It had happened, but that was not the important part. My lesson was not about what he had done, but about my own forgiveness. My lesson was rooted in forgiveness and greatness. I was not a victim. I was someone who had, given the opportunity, expanded enough to forgive." He neither condemned nor condoned my father's acts. He offered no sympathy, no process, no lap in which to cry or work out the turmoil of my mind. Nothing was relevant save my forgiveness and the way that seed of forgiveness was blossoming into a tree of greatness. The greatness of which he spoke was not a greatness of separate achievement. It was simply an opening, an expansion into a place where 2 become 1, where the strong lines between him and me between perpetrator and victim, between doer and doee, between subject and object dissolved. And I was able, most of the time, to live free in each present moment, not as the victim of my rehearsed history. The teaching regarding forgiveness is complex and fraught with many yes buts. Yes, of course, we should forgive as spiritual, compassionate beings, but doesn't that make us weak? How many times should we just keep forgiving while the world or specific individuals trample over us time and again? If we forgive, who will right the wrongs being done to us? We forgive because we need to be free. We forgive to expand the space and consciousness within ourselves. Holding on to pain, onto grudges, constricts us. It defines who we are by thick lines. I am the one who was abused. I am the one who was wronged. I am the one who always gets the short end of the stick. I am the alcoholic, or I am the child of the alcoholic. The greatness of which Pujya Swamiji spoke was not an ego-defining greatness of me as a separate great being. It was an acknowledgement of what is able to flow through me when I surrender my attachment to the story, when I loosen the grip on my identity as victim. Into the space created by surrender, into the space created by awareness of the perfection of the universe, grace and greatness flows. This is such a beautiful testimony and such a powerful testimony of the power of forgiveness. I loved reading this because it teaches us that we may never get an apology from a person or many people who have hurt us. I can say that in my life as well. I have not received that, and I stopped waiting for it. I stopped needing it to move on with my life because I have the power of forgiveness, and I can forgive when I know and I have expanded more and more into the truth of my own self through my spiritual practices and through especially the practice of living in the present moment, of not going back to the past and unconsciously recreating it, but going enough into it to, in the present moment, learn from it so that I am the creator and the architect of a bright new future for not only myself, but many other people. For a person to apologize is a sign of their own spiritual awakening and their own growth when it truly deeply comes from their heart, when it's not a forced thing, but truly something that comes from deep within. It gives an opportunity for new beginnings of your own karmic script anytime you genuinely can apologize from your heart. And it gives that new beginning, especially only really if it is followed by new behaviors that are more conscious. It's not enough to just give heartfelt apologies after all. We do have to change our behaviors. And when either happens, it is definitely a start of a new beginning. I have had situations in my life where people have really done a lot to harm me, and then their behaviors changed, and it was a sign of growth. And then there are some who apologized and then continued the same old behaviors. The apology was heartfelt and I accepted it. The behaviors, in some cases, well, they were not heartfelt. They went back into that whole unconscious thing. And in that case, we are asked in this spiritual tradition to again bring our discerning intellect back and say, okay, this is good that there was an apology from the heart. This is not acceptable that the behaviors did not change. Therefore, I have had to accept the apology and then stop the interactions when the behaviors were not aligning with what was acceptable to me from a space where I now honor my own self and therefore do not allow for people to treat me as anything less than the power that I am. We all have power within us, and it is our spiritual practice to stop being afraid of our own power, to awaken to our power, and we will know that we have truly awakened to our own power when we can accept and celebrate and revel in the power of another as a reflection of that which lives within our own self. This is the real meaning of what we say when we say Namaste. The power of the divine in me bows to that of you. We are all one, according to the ancient spiritual philosophy of Vedanta. This teaching of forgiveness, however, does not mean that because we are all one, we allow others to walk all over us, that we become doormats. This is actually a very big situation in the Indian civilization. There is an incredible book that I will put in the show notes called Two Classical Plays from India by D.P. Sinha, one of the most renowned Hindi playwrights in India today. He is a recipient of many awards, and his plays have actually been taught in many universities and are very popular with PhD students around the world. I had the honor of editing the English translation of a couple of his plays, one of which is called The Violence of Nonviolence, and it's in this published book that you can get on Amazon. It's such an incredible book, and its lessons have really changed the way I look at ahimsa, which is the practice of nonviolence. I grew up in the Jain tradition, greater Vedic spiritual tradition, and in Jainism, there is quite a strong emphasis on nonviolence. And, everything that is done to a strong extent, right, or to an extreme extent, has to be questioned again through that discerning intellect. And it is something that we absolutely must practice within ourselves. But the same Vedic tradition that gives us the teaching of ahimsa as the highest dharma or the highest duty or role of a human being also tells us that so too is violence in service of dharma, the greatest good of all. And in this particular introduction to the violence of nonviolence, D.P. Sinha writes how we are conditioned to view life in contradictory dyads, such as good and bad, rich and poor, past and present, traditional and modern, materialistic and spiritual, violent and nonviolent. But there are no such sharp distinctions between black and white in reality. There are also shades of gray. By courageously embracing out-of-the-box thinking, this play points to a third dimension, which is non-aligned with traditionally opposite binary elements. The truth, with a capital T, is one, indivisible and inclusive. It aims for the peace and welfare of all of humanity. From this perspective, even a heinous act like murder, committed to further the peace and welfare of mankind, becomes a spiritual act. In India, before the advent of Buddhism, Indians did not believe in the principle of absolute nonviolence. They discerned between violence against evil and violence against the noble. For ancient Indians, violence against the noble, innocent, and good was bad, while violence against evil was good and desirable. In this context, it may be noted that in the Sanskrit language there are two words for manslaughter, vad and hatya. If an evil man is killed, for the safety, security, and welfare of society, it is called vad. If a man is killed for personal vendetta or gain, it is considered hatya. While hatya is a sin and condemnable, vad is praiseworthy and necessary. Nonviolence has been an obsessive concern amongst Indians since the inception of Indian civilization. Indians believe in absolute nonviolence, that is, nonviolence even in the face of evil. They do not realize that nonviolence is unable to resist evil forces, and that this, in effect, actually promotes evil and can ultimately lead to the annihilation of all that is noble. Lord Krishna had warned Indians against absolute nonviolence in the classical Indian spiritual text, the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna pronounced the limits of nonviolence in unequivocal terms when he exhorted the warrior Arjuna to take up arms against evil for the purpose of upholding peace and righteousness. It may also be mentioned that all of the Hindu deities are always depicted with weapons in their arms, which are symbolic of their readiness to fight for righteousness. I find this really, really important because it tells us that we need to be able to act in service of truth by doing what is necessary to protect the good and to put a stop to those who are doing evil. The best way to be a spiritual warrior is to fight from a place when you are no longer angry. It is to fight from a place when you have actually in your heart deeply and truly forgiven. Swami Parthasarathi always says that sin is not in your action, but it is in your reaction. That means if in committing any act, even saying something nice to someone, which we're all told to do, right? Say something nice to them, be a nice girl, do this nice thing. We may feel some real mental agitation involved. Oh, I'm doing the nice thing, but I'm really angry and I really don't want to do it, but I'm doing it. That would be more sinful than actually simply in a situation like that, not doing anything or saying no if that is what is called for. In that saying no, if you have no more thoughts about it, if you have no more agitation about it, you simply do the act and you are done with it, then it is not a sin. Therefore, even in such an extreme case as killing someone, you can do so if you have first of all forgiven and seen the light of the same soul in that person as is living within you, and be able to recognize that even as you need to punish that person. If you are a soldier and it is your duty to kill, then you will not have any karmic negative repercussions of that in the line of duty, provided you are simply doing what you in that role ought to do. The minute you kill even one person, however, even after you may have killed lots of people because that's your duty as a soldier, when you kill just one person out of personal anger and vengeance, you will incur tremendous sin and great suffering in your present life and every life thereafter. Because even though it was in the role of your duty to serve as a soldier, when you do so out of personal vengeance and hatred, you will first of all create tremendous mental agitation and confusion and turmoil within yourself, but then you will also have to truly pay the price for that in every situation going forward. What does that mean for us in more everyday situations where we're not hopefully faced with such extremes? For us, it means that if you have, say, a harmful relationship where you are on the receiving end of a lot of hatred, negativity, shaming, and blaming for perhaps everything that another person does, then you first have to reach a place of true acceptance of the situation and taking responsibility for what was your responsibility or what was your role in being involved in that relationship. What did you want from that relationship? I had wanted some love and approval from this relationship that I had been in where I got really badly shamed. And I had to really let go of that desire. And in letting go of that desire, there was nothing really to do but to forgive and to see the childishness in this person, to see how unevolved they really were, and to understand that actually they had no idea what they were doing. It's like how Jesus says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." When we are able to first of all forgive, then and then only can we really take actions that will free us from the bondage of karma. And in my situation, the action I took was to completely cut off ties with not just one person, but many people who were involved in toxic shaming and scapegoating and many other things. But I did not cut those relationships and cut the communication involved in them until the moment I had completely let go of any lingering hatred or resentment or anger towards them. And I had also recognized that I was not going to hold on to it by not harming myself. I really took good care of myself as I went through this situation. I honored myself. And in honoring myself, I did not need anything more from anyone else. And that's when I was able to really let go and then to take strong action and to create very, very strong boundaries that cannot and will not be broken again by anyone. This is what it means when I say to forgive and never, ever forget who you really are. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I would encourage you to follow along with the True to Yourself podcast on Instagram at True to Yourself podcast. You can also learn more about some upcoming programs of The Ancient Way by visiting theancientway.co. We have a beautiful Circle of Life community program coming up where we will be able to really dive into the power of practice of these spiritual teachings like forgiveness. They're really easy to talk about. They're much harder to practice. But when we can really commit to practicing them, they can bring about such incredible revelations and transformations in our own lives. And we're able to make these kinds of changes even more exponentially quicker with the support of community. This kind of community that we have created within the Circle of Life program is going to be a really safe space to be able to have these kind of real dialogues and conversations and to be able to strengthen your own spiritual practice, to be able to continuously remember who you really are and to act and speak and think in alignment with that spiritual connection. We also have our Wellness Ambassador program, which is continuing to run through the rest of this year and into January of next year. You are welcome to join us for our module on how to be healthy in the autumn season or the fall season. And then we will be exploring what it means to transform yourself and to recreate yourself with these spiritual teachings in our following module. If you want to learn how to cook incredible foods that you love in a healthy way that will keep your body strong and immune, you can join us for the 9th module, which will be all about cooking all your favorite foods, but in much healthier, more digestion-friendly ways. And then we will be having an opportunity for you to join the program to learn how to transform trauma and become the hero of your own spiritual journey starting in March of next year. That program is currently in the works, and we'll be posting some more information about that. But I can guarantee you that even just in the preparation process for this program, it's really going to be an incredible journey to undergo for any kind of past pain or situation you may be holding on to that you wish to really let go of and free yourself from, so that you can manifest the kind of life that will lead you to the evolution of your true self. Thank you so much for joining me.